Coffee is for leaders.
The downside of that is there's a lot of times it's, why are we doing something? Well, because that's how we've always done it. Well, the market has shifted, our clients' needs have shifted, so we can't keep doing it that way. So making sure that there's visibility into what we're changing, why we're changing, and why it's important, that helps balance the fact that, so that we're not upsetting the culture. But more than anything, just continuing to make Cardis a great place to work, because the people here have been here a long time and love what they're doing.
I'm pleased to introduce Matt Tebbe, President and CEO of Cartus. Cartus delivers the full spectrum of strategic talent and corporate relocation services to organizations of all services in all sizes worldwide. These include more than a third of Fortune 100 companies, as well as hundreds of global clients with small to mid-sized programs. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. Honored to have you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Tell us how you became the president and CEO of Cardist. Like, what led to you being here with us today?
Sure. I wish it was some great, bold story. I mean, ultimately, a recruiter reached out. The prior CEO of Cardis had retired after a number of years. And, Cardis is a wholly owned subsidiary of Anywhere Real Estate. So Anywhere is the largest publicly traded residential real estate company in the country. Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, those are some of our brands. But I bring that up because the Anywhere leadership really was interested in bringing somebody from outside the industry. So somebody from outside real estate, somebody from outside of mobility and executive relocation into the role. And my combination of experience with growth and experience with operations were the two core skill sets that Anywhere was looking at with regards to their new leader. And so I went through a traditional interview process and ultimately came out on the other side as the selection.
Oh, that's incredible. That's a great story. Yeah, and it kind of matches with what you're doing, which it means it worked. How do you, so give us a sense for what you do. I know I kind of laid it out in kind of like the full spectrum of strategic talent mobility and corporate relocation services to organizations of all sizes worldwide. What does that mean? Tell us, give us that in like layman's terms.
Sure. So we're the global leader in corporate relocation services. So that's everything from a traditional executive relocation. A company has a new CEO and they live in California, but their new job is in New York. And so they need to move that person to New York. But then all the way down to, there's a lot of companies that will provide support for their interns moving out for a summer program. We provide the full spectrum of support for those services. And so that can be household good moves, home sale and home purchase, intercultural and language services if you're moving overseas, tax assistance, immigration assistance, everything that's required to get somebody into a new location, operating effectively in their new role. Cartus provides those services. And this is actually our 70th year. So we were founded back in 1955. And so we've been doing this for a very long time.
That's incredible. What have you learned since you've been the CEO and president?
I've learned a lot. It's interesting because mobility traditionally rolls up under human resources. But it's an enabling function. I mean, what we're doing is supporting talent management. And it's interesting the different ranges of some companies that really embrace their talent management, some that don't. And so it's been a real learning experience for me, just the different ways that companies think about their talent, the way they think about where their talent is, and ultimately how they can enable it. And, even more so in sort of the environment we're in, where companies are scaling back on DE&I programs, really being thoughtful about what they do, what they say, and how they do it. Regardless of that, there's still a need to get the best talent and have them in the right locations. And so just learning an enormous amount about that and how we can support it.
What have you learned and what are you seeing in terms of like this whole work from home that everybody did during COVID, then come out of COVID? It seemed like hybrid was really popular. Now it seems like people are leaning towards full return to the office. How are your clients and companies that you work with landing on that issue?
It's a really good question. A lot of it is industry specific. I mean, you hear like the banks obviously really want their people, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon's very vocal about his opinions on what he wants. There's a lot of other companies, though, who are very comfortable with hybrid and others who are very comfortable remote. Cardis ourselves are fully remote. We're a global company. We have offices in 8 different countries. And yet we downsized most of our real estate footprint before I joined, and we work very effectively remote. I think the biggest thing is, did companies during COVID and coming out of COVID put all the necessary processes and procedures in place so that they could be effective. I mean, as an example, part of the reason I think that companies work so well during COVID is because of the relationships. Clinton, you and I worked together for 10 years. I could just pick up the phone and call you. We could get stuff done. As more and more new hires come into that environment, they don't have those relationships. They don't know who to call. So if a company doesn't have the right processes in place to really enable that new hire and make them a success, they're not going to be. And so I think the companies that really embrace that mindset and change the way they did business have embraced hybrid and remote work and are very, very successful with it. The ones who didn't, where hybrid was a placeholder until we could get them back in, they're definitely going to be more biased towards we want to see people in the office and in that environment. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think it's really about how a given company is structured and whether or not they're able to support whatever model they've chosen.
Okay, now the question is AI, and I feel like it should be the only question and the only thing we're ever talking about. Like all of my guests, I feel like we should just spend the whole time of our interview talking about this thing, even though none of us know the answers. It's very fascinating, and it's a good idea to talk it out and get a sense for how everyone's thinking about it. So I have two questions about AI for you. One, how are you using it within Cardis? And two, how are you thinking about it more broadly and particularly with the clients and companies that you're working with?
Sure. I'm actually going to answer the questions in reverse, if that's okay, because the way we're thinking about it, there's two different lenses given the work we do. There's the back end Cardis operations, our consultants who engage with transferees, our supply chain, and then there's the actual called transferee experience, the front end, and the clients and transferees who would be using it. We're very focused, and the way we're using it is on the back end. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained, a lot of administrative work that can be taken off our consultants' plates. And so we're looking for, it's almost like the low-hanging fruit. But the other piece of that is, I'll call it the, not safety per se, but there's still a lot that's being worked out with AI. And you hear about hallucinations. When you think about going through a move, it's stressful as it is. Things go wrong. Even more so now, it's magnified in a corporate environment where you are trying to take on a new role in a new location, potentially moving your family and your kids and getting schools. So the last thing we want is for something to go wrong and that transferee to then be getting wrong information from AI. Literally, I've heard stories about somebody's cargo container falling off the ship. When all your possessions are sinking to the bottom of the ocean, you don't want to be engaging with a bot. You want to be talking to a human. And so we look very carefully at the demographics of who's being moved, who our clients are moving, especially at the executive levels. It still skews in a way that there's more comfort talking to a person than necessarily doing everything through mobility or through an app. But that's shifting. And so that's the other way that we're thinking about it is, what are the demographics? What are the channels that our transferees want to work through us? And how can we be as flexible as possible to meet those?
Yeah, that is. And how are you using it within the company? Are you like, just brief, and I know you kind of just touched on it there, but like, is it automating workflows? Is it helping you be more productive? Is it something you don't use that much currently?
So really focused on productivity. And so a specific example, when a transferee is authorized, our consultant gets on the phone and explains all their benefits to them and what the given company's policy allows or doesn't allow. And that could be an hour or two phone call. We then take the summary of that phone call, because it's not a copy and paste. It's specific to that transferee's circumstances. And so it's a different conversation if you're moving a family of 5 with 2 dogs versus you're a solo 20-something. Mm-hmm. And so that call traditionally would be summarized by the consultant, and that takes a lot of time. Now through AI, that whole process can be automated such that it's just a matter of minutes, still capturing, we do a once over again to make sure that the accuracy is there, but for the most part, when it comes to that type of summarization, it is. And so that's an example of the productivity gains. And as you can imagine, we do thousands of those, tens of thousands of those calls a year. So it's may only be a little bit for any given call, but then magnified by thousands, you get a lot of productivity savings.
Right. How are you thinking about it just general? Like, do you think it's going to, 5-10 years from now, what are we looking at? What does a job even mean in 10 years?
When you look at the rate of acceleration and how, ChatGPT 1 versus 4 and now all these other new providers, just how quickly it's progressed in a matter of years, I'm extremely bullish about what can come next. I whether or not we're going to the Terminator, and self-awareness is, Skynet's going to get its self-awareness, remains to be seen. But I think that it is going to continue to accelerate, and I don't see this as a fad, kind of like the metaverse has ultimately, come out to being, where that was the big thing a couple of years ago. I think there's enough tangible benefit, and the ways that companies are thinking about it and using it, it's only going to build on itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned DEI before, and I don't want to turn it into a political thing because I know it's become a political thing, but how is that affecting companies, and how are people thinking about it now that the winds have shifted and people are cutting back on DEI programs and roles and things like that within their company?
Well, there's, it's funny. We're just talking about this on an all hands with the Cardist team today, and especially from our perspective, there's two lenses. One lens is the same as any other company. What are our hiring practices, and how are we going to do them? And I'm of the belief that we want to get the best talent, and the diverse voices benefit a company. If you have one lens on a company, you're not going to get the best thinking. So, I mean, in that regard, we're going to, certainly align with the law and what's mandated, but we believe in basically, we believe in DE&I and bringing in the best talent. But then the other lens, and this is one of the offerings Cartus has, we offer consulting services on DE&I and talent management, because again, mobility is a piece of where you put your best people in the right places so that you can maximize the returns for the company. And it's that same lens. If a company X is only looking at, say, white males between the age of 40 and 50, whereas company Y is looking at the breadth of talent they have available to them, company Y is going to be more successful. And so it's not, it's almost changing the conversation from just thinking about it in terms of diversity and all the baggage that comes with that, and more looking at what is the best way for us to manage our talent and achieve the returns that are expected.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that it's become such a hot topic, huh? Like that must be a fascinating for business leaders, because I remember when DEI was being talked about in like 2010, and it wasn't even a political thing. It was just, hey, how do we? And now it really is. I mean, we're talking like the day after the president of the United States literally mentioned this in his State of the Union speech. So it's reached all the way to there.
Yeah, it's like you said, without getting political, but it's interesting how different topics have taken on outsized importance. Prior to coming to Cartus, I worked at a company called Riverside Insights, and we sold assessments into schools, the kindergarten through grade 12. It's another area where education has taken on this, I'm going to say, outsized importance. Education is incredibly important, but in terms of the political spectrum and how it is or isn't woke, or how different things being taught or not being taught, have created real dividing lines between whether it's red states, blue states, liberals, conservatives, whatever lens you want to use. And try to sort of stay out or making an opinion call on who's right or who's wrong. But it's just, these are things that are fundamental. Talent management and making your business success, that's fundamental to being successful in business. Education and what we teach our kids is fundamental to how successful they're going to be as individuals and how successful we as America are going to be in the long term and grand scheme of things. So it's one thing to make it an issue the way it has, but the more that we fight over it, the less likely anybody's going to turn out to be successful.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. What does a typical day look like for you?
The kind of at a macro level, I get up very early. I'm an avid cyclist. I've been a competitive athlete most of my life. So there's a small group of us who we're out on our bikes by about 5:30 in the morning, several days a week. All with the intent of kind of getting back before kids have to be off for school. So, start the day with exercise. Once they are, as I mentioned, Cartus is remote first. So my office and where I'm speaking to you from right now is just one of the rooms in my house. So I don't have to deal with the commute. So it's, get through the working day. And I work generally traditional hours, which allows me then to do, soccer games and basketball games in the evening. And then Cartus is a global company. So typically I am back on my computer, just checking emails, checking Teams, seeing if there's anything that requires my input, to support the people on the other side of the globe before then going to bed.
What do you read, and what reading recommendations would you have for us?
I am an avid reader. I love science fiction. I love a very narrow genre of running fiction. So Once a Runner by John Parker, The Olympian by Brian Granville. And then I like a real mix of nonfiction, exploration, and other things. The one that I'd recommend that I just finished a few weeks ago is called The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright. It's been out for a number of years, but essentially it's about the rise of Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden leading up to 9/11. And it's very, very approachable, despite a lot of, um, getting specific about the different names and the different people who are involved. And, someone my age, having lived through 9/11, and I was actually living in the DC area when that took place. And it's just a fascinating book about, and unfortunately knowing all the things that could have been done differently such that 9/11 didn't happen. But I'd strongly recommend that. And then more immediately, I'm reading The Nobody People by Bob Pohl, which is science fiction and basically like an X-Men grounded in reality. So it kind of runs the spectrum.
Oh, that's cool. That's way cool. Who's a leader that you admire or look up to, or see as like a great example of what a leader should be?
I mean, there's lots of stereotypical answers I could give to that, but again, a little more grounded. I feel like I've been extremely blessed in that almost every job I've ever had, I've had strong leaders, managers, and especially mentors. Because it's one thing to have the CEO of your company is this great leader and getting great results, but you have no interaction with them versus they're taking a personal interest in your development and your growth. And so my answer to that is actually some of the leaders that I've worked for within my career. So, specific names being like Andy Bodea, who is the chief operating officer at Equifax and who really gave me my first opportunity to take on a very senior leadership role. Rajiv Roy, who is also an Equifax exec, but who is my CEO at Riverside Insights, who also, great mentor and gave me great opportunities to take on new responsibilities and have a chance to deliver on them. But again, using the word at a macro level, the fact that they were willing to invest their personal time and energy to mentor me and to make me better at what I did, you don't often see that. And to me, that's a sign of a great leader.
What do you know now that you wish you had known at the beginning of your career?
One of the biggest lessons learned I've had is, and it's maybe a bit of a cliche, but not being afraid to just quickly take decisive action. And so again, as a specific example, I had a sales leader several jobs ago who, when you got him in front of clients, I mean, just he knew them backwards and forwards, and they were buddy, and he was so good. But then on the back end, back in the office, I mean, he was, to use the word bluntly, I mean, a bit of a cancer in terms of the culture, but because he was so good with clients, I waited way too long to make a change. And once I did, I realized, oh, crap, I should have done this a long time ago. And so that's been a real learning for me, is that you'll almost never look back when you take decisive action like that and say, oh, that was the wrong move, or I should have waited longer. Inevitably, when you know there's a problem, the quicker you move to solve it, the better off you and your team is going to be.
Being a remote first company, how do you build culture, define culture within Cartus?
It's a great question. One of the things actually that was really wonderful in coming into this role is that Cartus has a tremendous amount of tenure. As I've met different members of the team, I introduce myself and tell me about your role and how long you've been with Cartus. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I met somebody who, and this was a year and a half ago, who had been with the company for 52 and a half years. And we're only 70 years old. So, part of it is that I haven't had to create a new culture from scratch because it's so embedded, and people, they love their colleagues. They love what they do to support the transferees. Because I asked, what keeps you here that long? And it's that. So really my focus is on not screwing it up and making sure that, bringing transparency so that people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because the downside of that is there's a lot of times it's, why are we doing something? Well, because that's how we've always done it. Well, the market has shifted, our clients' needs have shifted, so we can't keep doing it that way. So making sure that there's visibility into what we're changing, why we're changing, and why it's important, that helps balance the fact that, so that we're not upsetting the culture. But more than anything, just continuing to make Cardis a great place to work, because the people here have been here a long time and love what they're doing.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And do you find, do you have to over communicate in the remote environment? Like how do you manage it versus being able to talk to that person around the water cooler?
I'm definitely an advocate of over communication. And it's funny though, because you try to communicate messages through different channels, Teams, videos, emails, live all hands. And then you get the feedback that it's still not enough. And then you get other people communicating like, you're hitting us over the head with a hammer. So there's no hard and fast way to do it right. But just in general, the way you said it, Clint, I'm definitely an advocate of over communicating, doing it through different channels. And I would rather somebody hear things 2 or 3 times than only say it once and somebody potentially misses it.
What's your sense for, and we're kind of, I guess, a fourth of a way into 2025 at this point, but how are you thinking about the economic outlook of 2025, particularly versus 2024, which had so much uncertainty? It does seem like there's a little bit more certainty here in 2025, although we'll see what the tariffs add to that. So how are you thinking about the economic outlook of this year?
I'd actually say that there's still as much uncertainty this year as last year. So last year, it was the threat of recession. It was rising interest rates. It was Wall Street rewarding companies for cuts and, the Mark Zuckerberg's Meta's year of efficiency. That was causing a lot of companies to be cautious, to retrench, to focus on cutting costs. Now going into 2025, there was the initial optimism with the Trump administration being elected, thinking that that was going to create a lot of opportunities, take away some of perhaps the barriers that the Biden administration had put up. But as you just said, uncertainty around tariffs and uncertainty around call it the global war in Ukraine, and so how we're engaging with different countries and leaders. What we're seeing, especially across certain industries, you think government, you think defense. That same retrenching. And it's more than anything, it's the uncertainty. So, as we've even seen in the last couple of days with tariffs, they're on, they're off. Well, maybe we're going to have a deal and they'll be off. And so it's the fact that there's no definitive path forward and things seem to be oscillating back and forth. That's what's making it hard for anybody to feel comfortable making firm decisions. I think there's still general optimism that the administration is going to be business friendly, but I think there needs to be a little more stability before companies will feel comfortable that, whatever they're experiencing will stick versus now it's going to be different a week later.
Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
So I actually mentioned him earlier. I mean, I would say Andy Bodea. I was an individual contributor on his team at Equifax. When my manager moved into a new role, I think he really did take a chance in selecting me to be his backfill. And so the specific role was leading, we called it Enterprise Growth Initiatives, but it was the program management arm of Equifax. We were responsible on executing on the strategic plan and growth playbook. And this made me a direct report to the chief operating officer, brought a lot of visibility with it. And so I think he went out on a limb a little bit, and that I'd only been with the company for a year. He saw potential in me and gave me that chance. And that really skyrocketed everything I've done since then because of the visibility, because of the opportunities, and again, because of his direct involvement in my career with his mentorship. I mean, he's still somebody that I reach out and talk to today. And I'm really grateful for that continued support.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really means a lot to have you here. Let's have you back again soon. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me, Clint. This was awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Matt.